Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the Jobseeker chat series. I'm Louise Triance. S1 Jobs are supporting and sponsoring these live chat events. They are Scotland's #1 job site, and we're delighted to be working with them to provide their 1 million Scottish job seekers a new interactive way to access advice and guidance to help them succeed in their career. Today, we are talking about how to stay positive during the job search. I'm joined by Gail and Danielle, who I will let briefly introduce themselves. But first, if you've got any questions, please do ask them in the side chat if you're on the Crowdcast show. If you're on Facebook and you're wanting to chat with us, we'll probably come back to you after the show about that, and the same on YouTube. And if you're watching it after the event, just leave comments as well, and we'll make sure that we speak to you and engage with you afterwards. So like I said, I'm joined by Gail and Danielle. I reckon between us we've got a good 50 years recruitment experience. Gail, do you want to just go first and give us a quick overview of what you do and where you work?
Of course, thank you, Louise. My name is Gail Sampson, and I've been working in the talent and resourcing sector for nigh on 20 years. I am a qualified career coach. I qualified with Firework last year and have been working closely with job clubs in my local area. So I'm hoping I can give some insight from both sides of the equation to help everyone succeed in their career search.
Thank you very much. And Danielle?
So I'm Danielle, and my business is called Hot Seat Recruitment. I've been working in the recruitment industry since 2001. So I've worked in every position you can in an agency and heard many stories. I've worked closely with lots of job seekers over the years, and yeah, it's a really tough thing looking for work, and you know that I love nothing more than to try and help people get on the right track and to kind of find what they want to go for and get out of the rut that they can sometimes find themselves in.
Brilliant. Okay, so this is about staying positive, and I think that for some people, they think maybe I'll get a new job, maybe I don't enjoy where I'm working. They look on a job board, they apply for a couple of jobs, and they just seem to sail through. They just seem to get that job so easily. Whereas I think for the vast majority of us, it's not like that at all. Applying for a job can be quite a demotivating process, and you can feel really quite rejected. And I know one of the things that you said to me, Danielle, was that you really feel like maybe you've lost control of the situation. And is that what you find when you chat with people?
Yeah, definitely. I think what happens, I mean, it really, it depends on what the reasons are for why someone's looking for work. I mean, there's so many circumstances around it. You know, someone could have been made redundant, or they could be returning to work, after having a break, or looking for a career change. And, it's like you say, sometimes you think, it'll be easy, I'll just get another job, and you kind of launch into it, and then you find actually it's not that easy at all. And when you find you're struggling, then it becomes a whole different ball game. The whole thing becomes, I need to find another job as one big thing, as opposed to breaking it down into little sections. But, when you do look at it on a whole, it's a massive thing. And the feeling of being out of control, it's really overwhelming. It's horrible. The unknown, it's really hard.
And that's what I was going to say, is that you do have that feeling of being overwhelmed, and it can make you feel quite a lot of despair about your personal circumstances. So the people you're dealing with in your job club, Gail, are these people who are quite a long way through the process and are struggling, or do people come to you at the start? What would you normally find?
Complete variety. So, we help with some people who are at risk of redundancy, all the way through to people who have struggled with job search for, some people for years. And there can be many, many reasons for that. Close to where I live, I'm based in the home counties. We do have some quite industry-specific hotspots. And that can be both, kind of a challenge and a reward for some people, i.e. if they have a really niche skill, and they can't get to the local area, obviously the size of the job market does decrease and what have you. But what I do find very interesting is we do a lot of training in the job club around resilience and, kind of staying focused. We do find when people take time to take that step backwards from their job search and review the situation, and refocus, repurpose, just as they would with any project at work, that actually those feelings of overwhelming can, not always, but can, kind of be more managed. I don't think they ever disappear, particularly not when, when you are facing redundancy, or you are unhappy in a role and you really want to get away, my advice to people is you almost have to deal with that sort of root cause as a separate issue from the job search. Otherwise, the job search becomes a great big mountain to climb, rather than breaking it up into the more controllable and more manageable pieces. But ultimately, that's the issue with job seeking. That final decision is out of your control. So, to quote Derek Redmond and other athletes, it's about focusing on controlling what you can control as well. And that should help people kind of take back control of their job search and feel a little more empowered. But I don't underestimate how daunting it can be for people.
Okay, and what we're going to do in a minute is to give some practical tips of things you can actually do, because I think that us saying, it is a flawed process, and recruitment really is, still doesn't help you when, like you say, Gail, you're either trying to move away from something you hate or move towards something you want to love. What we need to have is some practical things you can do. But first of all, I think that if you've been job hunting for quite a long time and you're struggling to stay positive because you're really not getting anywhere, one of the things you can do, and this is the thing I'm going to come to you about, Danielle, is to look at whether there's something you need to recognise. I'm not saying there's a problem with yourself, but whether there's something in the process which isn't working. And that, I think you said to me earlier, it could be a CV, it could be. So what sort of problems do people maybe ought to consider recognising?
So I think that there's just so many stages in the job search, and like we said earlier, when you think about it on a whole, it's like, this job search just isn't working. But when you actually take a step back and look at it and think, okay, what isn't working about this? Is it the case that I'm applying for, I hear all the time, I'm applying for so many jobs every day, and I've seen a comment coming up on the side, loads of people, you never hear back from anyone. People spend all this time and effort and applying for all these jobs and they don't hear back. So that can sometimes put people off applying, or it can make them make kind of irrelevant applications. So that in itself can be a stumbling block. So, people can think the job search just isn't working out for me. But sometimes if you take it back a step, it's actually, okay, something's going wrong at the application stage, or something's going wrong maybe at, something could be maybe made better in my CV. It's not to say there's anything wrong with the job seeker at all. So it's not a rejection thing. It's, it's like, what can I do about this? Can I look at my CV? Is it really in line with what I've done and what I want to do? Am I presenting this to someone in order to solve their problem? Can they see quickly where I could come in to make their life easier? Or, or maybe you're going for interview after interview, but you're not getting that offer. I mean, that in itself, that's something that, are you going after the right jobs, or is there something you can look at with maybe your interview? Maybe so many people get interviews they can be really awful, they're very nerve-wracking.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about on the 13th of March, a specific show all about interview tips and techniques. But I think that it is, and we'll talk about maybe finding a buddy or a mentor, job club, but sometimes introducing someone like that into the process can help you recognise whether there is something you can do with the way in which you apply, the way in which you search your CV, to kind of like almost have a reset. And I'm sure it's one of the things you do, Gail, is to look at the process with the people.
Yeah, so if we take the CV, one of the biggest blockers to applying to a role is that when you're writing your CV, you know what you do inherently, and you will accidentally skip gaps. I'm sure when I drive home tonight, because I've done this route so many times, I will not know how I've got myself home. I would not be able to describe it in a step-by-step way. And one of the biggest frustrations that I see in CVs, whether it be through friends, family, job club, at work, is when the CV hasn't been what I call that sort of the stranger test. And I'm not suggesting you jump up to a stranger in the street and go, read my CV and tell me what we do. But what I encourage sort of people who come to me to do is actually to take their CV, ask someone to read it. They can read it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, really doesn't matter. But then ask them to describe back what it is that they do, what your key skills are. Because if somebody who doesn't know you particularly well cannot do that, what hope does a hiring manager or an HR manager, a recruitment manager have in being able to convey that? And it's not laziness, it's not it's not misunderstanding. It's a pure fact that as humans, our brains will fill in gaps that are missing, and it's really, really important just to take that time to, as I say, do that little stranger test. Might feel a little bit awkward seeing one of your friends or family struggle to describe what you do, but that can really be an icebreaker to breaking down that part of the process and understanding why your CV may not be being read.
No, okay, I think that's a great tip. Well, should we come on to the practical things you can do, seeing as that is the first one? So, how do you? I mean, you can't literally ask a complete stranger. How do you choose the right person to give you advice in your job search? I mean, is it your mum? Is it your spouse? Is it your best friend? I mean, who would you ask to do that? I'll come on to you in a minute, Danielle, but who would you ask to do that with you then, Gail?
So I think so. If it's just purely my CV and in terms of communication, it would be somebody who didn't know me well enough to know what I'm doing, but somebody who I feel comfortable with. So it could be another mum on the school run. It could be, kind of a friend or a neighbour, but somebody who doesn't witness me coming home going, oh yes, I've been working on this project today and I've been doing this, or somebody I've trained with, because obviously they're going to have that same level of base knowledge as what I'm doing. So somebody who you feel comfortable with and who's not going to feel intimidated about giving you that feedback, but somebody, as I say, who doesn't live and breathe that same sort of environment, but equally, I've got friends of mine who know me very well. They know me through hobbies, and we'd be quite happy to, but they don't know what I do on a day-to-day basis. So, kind of they are part of my social circle and be quite comfortable. In terms of the whole job search, I think it is really, really important to try and, kind of get input from, kind of parents, spouses, friends, and what have you, because let's face it, so many parts of our life make up our life. Kind of people can be quite objective. But as I say, you want somebody who knows you well enough that they're going to be honest with you, but isn't going to also fill in those gaps.
Okay, great. Have you got anything to add to that, Danielle, about maybe the way in which you work with people?
Yeah, I agree with loads of what you're saying, Gail, definitely. I just think it's funny what you're saying about the stranger thing, because I always say to people, when you're writing a CV, just imagine, if you're applying for a job, just imagine that it could be being read either by someone that's in there doing an apprenticeship or 2 weeks work experience, or the director or the decision maker, and just make sure. You might feel like you're writing your CV the most basic way possible, but if they're going to really see quickly what you're all about, then it's worth doing. Sometimes you just think, oh no, they know that, but it's not always the case. So I love that stranger idea. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's good to kind of get a variety of opinions on your CV about what you're doing. But I think sometimes there is a danger if we ask our friends and family, do we always get the advice that's going to help? We might sometimes just get great, and that's great, we love to hear that, so I wouldn't depend solely on that. I think it's great to have as in addition to the advice you're going after. Sometimes our friends and family can keep us safe because they don't want to hurt our feelings, because they are friends and family. So yeah, like you're saying, it's good to find someone that is impartial, that can look at it and give you some pointers. I think sometimes if you can maybe, like you're saying, Gail, if you can say to someone, this is my CV and, this is where I want to go, where would you see? Would you feel that I'm in line with that? Or, sometimes it's good to kind of get a bit of inside info. I mean, sometimes you need to do a little bit of research into the direction that you want to take. And, don't be afraid to ask for advice from from people that are a little bit further on than you are. You know, sometimes you can get some really good pointers. It doesn't always have to be about, you know, going, like, I've seen so many comments in there saying about recruiters not getting back to people, and you know, if you are with a recruiter, they should really be kind of helping with some kind of coaching, but you know, I know that it's not always the case. So yeah, it's really, sometimes you have to kind of have a think about, you know, who is in a perfect position to guide you along where you want to go.
But it sounds like it's more than one person, is what you're both saying, isn't it? Is that it's your book club mate who knows you well enough to look at your CV but doesn't really know what you do on a daily basis. It's your close relationships who can maybe keep you going. But also I like the idea of reaching out to other people. I hate the expression reaching out. Connecting with other people for advice. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about staying positive and about building relationships. And I'm sure in some later shows we'll talk about the value of networking and getting that right job. But using a tool like LinkedIn to connect with people who are in your space, not to say, have you got any jobs, but to say, and not even necessarily to say I'm struggling with my job search, but to say I'm in a job search situation. I wonder whether you could give me some hints about the type of people you look for and what you look for in a CV, or I'm not sure how much information to put about my previous responsibilities. Any excuse to get in touch with people who can help to give you advice or suggestions, including recruitment agencies, because in last week's show, both Marissa and Lawrence said they were happy to, and they're both agencies, happy to speak to any job seeker and to give them advice. So I know that some agencies don't, and they're not the great agencies, but building that network of mentors, buddies, job clubs, that can really make a massive difference in the support network, can't it?
Without a doubt, and I think it's one of the things that people struggle with it is it can be unquantifiable. Sometimes you don't necessarily recognize the value that it adds, whereas you can easily, you know, kind of, sort of work out, you know, sort of how many interviews you've been to, you know, kind of you can get all your analytics from job boards and what have you. But, you know, kind of sometimes it's hard to quantify that cup of coffee with a friend when, you know, kind of they work in HR and they might be able to give you some advice. You know, kind of, you know, sort of to reach out, as Lou says, you know, when you're reaching out to your, you know, the school mum network. I mean, I still say that people who, if you're, you know, kind of in any sort of crowded situation, you just do not necessarily know who's next to you. So strike up that conversation. Who knows? You know, kind of it could lead to, you know, kind of some valuable advice. I get contacted on LinkedIn, not as much as I would expect to, for career advice. And, you know, kind of, I always try and respond. Not necessarily, it might take me 2 or 3 days, but I do always try and respond. And again, we are in an environment where everyone wants everything now. And I think sometimes, you know, kind of people just need to recognise that people don't check LinkedIn every day. They do have that busy pace, but actually some of that information could come in 2 or 3 days time. And don't be disillusioned just because the first 2 people haven't responded, you know, within 5 minutes.
No, totally.
You know, kind of, it's, you know, you know, job seeking can be a marathon and not a sprint, and networking is definitely a marathon and not a sprint, but will certainly add value, you know, if you approach it with that sort of cautious mind.
Okay, so I want to come on to some of these other practical things you can do, but I was going to answer a couple of things in the sidebar. So as you just mentioned, Danielle, getting loads of comments about, and let's not beat around the bush, agencies who just don't bother to come back to job seekers. So you've applied for, and I had a conversation with someone who'd applied for 60 jobs and had 3 responses. So 57 recruitment individuals, they weren't all agencies actually, 57 of those 60 had not responded to that person in any way, shape or form. Now, we're not going to talk about why that's wrong. It is just wrong. So in the shows we do, which is for recruiters, we can inform and we can educate, but this is just about the frustration for you as a job seeker. And I mean, what do we say? I've got nothing more to say than it shouldn't happen. It does. It's not about you personally. But is there anything else we can take from that when we're looking for a job? Gail?
It's always a tricky one because, like you, I agree it shouldn't happen, but it does. But I also can, you know, remember when you know you do get sort of CVs which, you know, don't necessarily hit the mark. No no real care has been taken with it. And, you know, I've noticed the comment when people do take the time to apply, and I agree. I've taken 2-3 hours to apply for jobs in the past. And if I didn't get a response for those, I'd have been devastated because I had invested a lot of time. And I think this is the clear distinction. If, you know, sort of, what does the word applying for job mean? Is it just sending your CV off, you know, kind of, you know, sort of speculatively, or is it actually, you know, kind of really looking at the detail and creating your CV as a marketing document? And I think what I notice is in my own job search, when I've taken that time and really applied properly, I have had a much higher reply rate, even a yes or a no, but just in general, that when I can actually hand on heart say I have applied rather than just click send, I have noticed a difference, you know, sort of on that. And so I think that, you know, that you know, just a little bit of a reset on thinking about it. It's 2018. I don't actually think things should be automated. I think if people take the time to really write and then apply, we'd have a much different, you know, sort of environment around this. But it never is personal.
No.
It doesn't, you know, and that's something I have to reiterate is, you know, it's some people it will be well intentioned. I'm going to go back to that person at another time, and then something happens, and you know, it doesn't happen. For some people, it will be laziness and rudeness, and they don't want to do that. But unfortunately, it does all get put into a into a bucket, and you know, sort of, and it's we do as an industry, we need to step up, and we need to, you know, kind of create an environment which helps people apply and for the relevant jobs, and you know, sort of helps people to understand, you know, kind of the importance of an acknowledgement. As I say, when I applied, my response rate, yes or no, both went up, and it was just even knowing where I stood made such a difference, and it's something that my team know that I believe very passionately about.
And in next week's show, when we talk about managing that job hunt effectively, one of the things I want to talk about is the things that you can do around applying. So that's about taking care in your application, researching the company, making contact with individuals in the company. And again, they're the things which can increase the response rate that you get, knowing when to push for a response versus appearing like a stalker. So some of those things, we won't talk about them today, unfortunately, because we've only got 40 minutes for each show. Danielle, are you okay if I come to you for the next question? Because I do, we ought to try and get through as many things as possible for people. I am going to comment on this. Ian's just written in the sidebar, some companies or agencies are screening applications with an algorithm, and Ian, that's going to happen more and more. So where we're looking from, where Gail and Danielle and I are looking from, it's all about AI. It's all about chatbots. It's all about using technology to improve the process. We've just got to get that right, so that what we're actually doing is we're finding the right job for job seekers, as well as using the technology. And I think that I would be feeling a bit concerned if I felt that my CV wasn't being looked at by a real person. But I think in the main it is. Right, so practical things you can do. Now, we've skipped a load, but Danielle, having a daily routine, being organised, having a to-do list. Tell us about those things.
Okay, so, you know, everyone always says looking for work is a job in itself. And I do think there is some truth to that. So I think it's good if you can get yourself organised. And that does mean, I mean, obviously lots of people are going to be looking for jobs in lots of different areas, but, you know, the one thing remains, that the first impression always has to be good. And the way that you present yourself in the first instance has to be, you know, it has to be great. You have to sometimes kind of almost put to one side the fact that you want to get a job, you want to get noticed, you want to get an interview. So just focus on that for the time being. So really everything has to revolve around that, really. So yeah, set some time aside each day to, you know, don't get too bogged down by just going through the same old job boards again and again. And one thing I quickly want to jump in with, I know we've covered it before, but I want to jump in and just say, a lot of people will have their CVs on lots of job boards. And you must remember that sometimes, I know you have to kind of complete a form or an application form in order to have your CV on a job board. Sometimes they will literally just take that information and generate a whole new CV on you. And it's not really the best CV format. So many times a day I get a CV that when I present it to the person and say, do you recognize this? They don't. And that's another thing, going back to, you're not being rejected because of you. Sometimes your CV has been completely doctored. So there is a practical tip on that, if I can just add it in quickly. When you're applying for a job, it's sometimes good just to add in and say an original version of my CV is available for request. Sorry, just going back to the routine. It is important to schedule in some time to do a bit of everything each day. Don't just sit from 9 till 5 at your computer, because you just lose the will to live. Make sure your CV is in order. Make sure you're kind of focused on where you want to go. LinkedIn is fantastic, not necessarily just shouting, I'm out of work, hire me, but just to get involved in conversations with people that you could potentially, you could maybe want to work at, show your worth and show what you know. So, use LinkedIn as a conversation tool, as well as, don't just be hire me, but, definitely use that. But if you can keep it varied and just keep getting your name out there, then, you should start seeing some results. But yeah, definitely it's good to have some routine and not just fall into the trap of the 9 to 5, just staring at the same old job again and again.
And I'm going to come to you in a minute, Gail, because I know you've got some ideas about other things we should be slotting into our days. But during that 9 to 5, and so many people have said to me when I was talking about this show, treat your job search like a job. So have that routine. But like you're saying, chunk it up. So, spend some time doing networking, spend some time working on relationships. With job boards like S1 Jobs, you set up job alerts. You say what criteria you're looking for. They come to you. So allocate a bit of that time to go through those job alerts and to see which ones are right for you to apply. So you can actually put quite a strong routine in place. But Gail, you wanted to say something about that routine and other things to add into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're talking about staying positive during the job search, and sometimes we can be, again, back to sort of quantifying, I've sent this many CVs, I've connected with this many of people, I've looked at this many ads, this many job boards. I think it's really important to invest some time in well-being, kind of ensure that you are getting half an hour of fresh air and exercise every day. There's so much out there about how that lifts the mood and keeps you focused and what have you. And I'm sure all of us can admit that, it's the first thing that goes out the way. But, I really believe that, to keep yourself focused and to keep yourself, positive, that sort of that investment in your emotional and physical well-being will really put you in good stead. It's not saying you have to start running marathons or training for Tough Mudder, but as I say, a half-hour walk around the block, will, you'll get your social contact up, depending where you live, you'll get fresh air, you'll get vitamin D, you'll get that little bit of physical exercise. And more importantly, you'll give your brain a rest and a chance just to relax, and that will really help, keep yourself keeping positive as you're going through your job search. And I think
you really do have to schedule that in. You almost have to force yourself to do that, because what you're looking to do is to achieve something every day, to move a step closer to the job you want. And I think that not happening makes you feel very depressed. And then you think, well, I can't take time to go for a walk. So you do have to recognise the importance of that at the outset. And if you don't, that's why it's really important. Yeah. You've got a mentor, a buddy, a job club. They will help to remind you that is not wasted time. That is really essential time. Can I come to a couple of the questions? So Stephen has said, this is going back to not getting a response from applications. And I'll answer it because it's in the context of the show. When following up on an application, how persistent can a candidate be without being seen as a pest? And I know that's a real concern. So I'd like you both to give a brief answer on it. Do you want to go first, Gail?
I think it depends on your approach. I'm sorry, that sounds very fence-sitting. As far as I'm concerned, if somebody gets through to me by the phone and I can take the call, I take the call, I give them an answer. If they accept that answer, then they're not a pest, they've been professional and what have you. If they challenge me and we have a really good conversation and we agree for next steps, again, that's not being a pest. What becomes a pest is when you get 2 or 3 LinkedIn messages, 4 or 5 voicemails with nothing new. And I think that's the key. It's how do you advance your application? So for me, it's, you know, kind of, by all means, I genuinely welcome it. If I've missed something on a CV, point it out to me. But, you know, kind of have that sort of reason. But as I say, it's the meticulous message. I would say, you know, after 4 or 5 chases, that probably, you know, but that's provided I have responded. Because if I haven't responded, then I've only got myself to blame.
Danielle?
Okay, I mean, so if someone's getting in touch because, you know, they haven't heard from someone, which has, you know, people say to me all the time that I haven't heard, the closing date was last week, if there is a closing date, I still haven't heard, can I get in touch? And I will always say, you know, yeah, okay, I think it's fine to kind of, you know, this is the direct applications now, I think it's fine to give them a nudge and just say, you know, I really hope you've received my application and that I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I mean, there comes a point, it's like, you know, it's just being a human in general, isn't it? How many times are you going to prod someone? But I guess it just, it depends. Like Gail said, you know, if you haven't heard and it's just, you know, complete tumbleweed, then, you know, yeah, I would say, you know, I'd really appreciate a response to my application. But, you know, if someone's come back to you and said, you know, thanks for your application, it's a no. Yeah, it's frustrating. It's so hard because you do want to go back and say, well, why? You know, at what point did it become a no and what else can I do? But, you know, the long and short, again, it depends. If you, like Gail says, you know, you might strike on someone that's going to say, right, okay, you know, well, it was down to this, that and the other, or maybe I've missed something and let's talk it through. It is such a, I'm going to sit on the fence as well. It really is a case-by-case scenario, which I know doesn't really help, but it just
I don't think you can win on this one. I think if you don't follow up, you'll miss some opportunities. If you do follow up too much, then people will think you're a stalker and they won't want to hire you. David said in the comments earlier, you know, why would you want to work for a company who don't come back to you? And I can totally see why you'd feel like that. But sometimes it's HR or recruitment, it's not the line manager, it's not the department in which you're going to work, it's just a flawed process. That's why it's difficult to stay positive, I'm afraid. So a few more things we want to talk about, and we've got 10 minutes left. So I saw on LinkedIn the other day, we were talking about this subject on LinkedIn, and somebody said, when you're looking on a job board, even if you're only 40% of what they're asking for, apply for everything where you're even vaguely right. And then somebody else said, no, that is how to get so down about the job search. If you apply for everything, then you are going to get 200 rejections. Only apply for things where you're 95% there. Now, who wants to go first on that? Gail? Oh, go on, sorry.
So, you know, you make a very valid point. If you apply for absolutely everything and go for the, you know, sort of the, you know, the more, you know, the sort of the spray and pray, you know, kind of mentality, then you are going to be, you're not going to hear from as many. I've always maintained a job spec is a wish list. You know, kind of, it is highly unlikely that you are going to find somebody who ticks, you know, kind of every box. And I think that statistically, there is data out there, and I'd hope to look it up before now to reference it, that shows that female job seekers are more likely to wait until they are 85% plus, you know, kind of a match before applying, whereas male tend to be around about the 60. So both are above the 50% mark, and I must try and get that reference to put on the comments. But I think you've got to be serious. This is a business decision. Recruitment, hiring, whatever you want to call it, is a business decision. You need to demonstrate that you will be effective in that role. Not that you are a checklist that ticks every single box, but you understand the problem that job spec is trying to solve, and you have enough of the skills and the capability to learn the others to deliver that solution to that sort of area. And that's when I think it will vary. For some roles, I think in my current role, I certainly didn't tick 100% of the boxes, but I had confidence that I could solve the problems that they were looking for. And that came from research, looking at to what they were doing. So I don't think there is a magic formula in terms of percentage, but I think it's just remembering that it is a wish list which will help the business alleviate a problem, implement a new process, and understand how you can enable that. And I think that you will find that you will get a better result. And hopefully you're not looking for that, kind of really rare role. It should, it should actually open up more opportunities for you rather than feeling that it's closing down on opportunities.
And Danielle?
Well, I just think if you're looking for work and you see a position that you really want to go for, I think you need to be clear on why you want to go for it. Okay, so you might think, that's nothing I've ever done before, but I really fancy it because of X, Y, and Z. And I think if you can be clear on your reasons why you want to go for it, then there's some substance there. It might be worth looking at. Maybe not necessarily to that particular job, unless you can come up with some really decent transferable skills that you have from outside the area that you can bring in. But maybe it's something that you can just think, wow, I hadn't thought about that before. That's really interesting to me, and I think I might want to pursue that. So I'll look into it. So going back to the research again. So, but for me, if someone came to me and said, I really want to apply for this role, how am I going to do it? I would be looking for transferable skills or actual experience personally. But I think otherwise it's just more rejection.
Yes, yeah, and but I think you both touched on this. Is if you're seeing jobs that are kind of quite attractive to you, then it's opening up new ideas that you've got as a job seeker. Now, there is sometimes an opportunity to get those skills. You see a role which is slightly different from what you've been doing. There's an opportunity, and I know this is again the long game. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's really frustrating, but there is an opportunity to get some of those skills, to potentially do some volunteering work in that area, to start to build relationships with people who are doing that job or hiring that job, just to find out a bit more about it. So on some of the job boards like S1, there's a ton of information about different jobs. So you spot something you think you're interested in, maybe do, like you said, a bit more research before you apply for it. And then if you can talk about why it interests you and what you're working towards to be able to do that job, you're already starting a conversation with the recruiter or the hiring manager. So I think I'm a bit on the fence myself, but I think it's worth exploring every opportunity that you're interested in. The other thing about staying positive during the job search is that when you have got that interview, what happens when you don't get feedback after the interview? So again, it's another complaint, probably more about agency recruiters than direct hiring companies. But as an individual looking for a job, how are you meant to stay positive when you go for an interview and literally it's tumbleweed? So Danielle, what's your advice around that?
Well, this happens way more than it should, and it's one thing for someone to apply for a job or 10,000 jobs, as is the case, and not hear anything. But when you've been for an interview and you've taken the time to actually, take yourself along to a company for an interview and then you don't hear anything, which does happen, there really is, there is no excuse for that. Sometimes it's just as bad to just kind of go, unfortunately, you weren't successful. I think if you get to interview stage, to the case where you've had, a hiring company has had that much interest in someone that they want to meet them in person, and they only, it's the least they can do is to say, to be so grateful for them to going along, if nothing else, it's really bad PR on them, because what's the first thing you do when you go, if you don't hear back from a company, you're going to talk about it. So it's really bad news when someone can't at least say, I'm sorry, you didn't get the job. I know this is an awkward conversation to have or an awkward email to write, whatever. But it's essential, you need to kind of help someone on their way. But if you were on the receiving end of that or not, again, it's like Gail says, it's not personal. It's not personal to you. It's just not. Sometimes you'll strike it lucky. You'll have an interview. Obviously, the luckiest thing is you get the job. But sometimes it's going to be the case that you don't. And you still need to know why. And sometimes you will get someone that is going to understand that you need to be put on a different path and just say, look, if it wasn't, sometimes you're going to be up against someone that has done just that thing before, and it's just the luck of the draw. If you can get someone that says, it came over that you need to concentrate on this, that, and the other, then you are lucky, and to get that feedback. So it's just, again, go back to what Gail says, you can't take it personally. You really can't. You just have to crack on and just, on to the next one, really.
But Gail, there can be nothing more personal than giving up an hour of your time, telling somebody all about yourself, and then them not getting back to you. I know what you're saying, Danielle, and I totally agree. But Gail, it really does feel personal, doesn't it?
I think, yeah, and to me, this really is unforgivable if somebody does come in, because you have invested a half hour, an hour of your time, whatever it may be, and I don't understand how kind of how you can't do that. But as Danielle says, unfortunately, it does happen. And this is when I turn into my mother, because I hear myself saying it says more about them than you, darling. And it's that kind of it is reminding that kind of that it's their behavior, it's their action, it's not a direct reflection on you. They have made a conscious decision to behave in an unprofessional and an inappropriate manner, and that is the bit that is not personal. But this is where it is very, very difficult to stay positive, because you have applied, you have got through the telephone screen, you have done a fantastic job, you have ironed your shirt beautifully, you look fantastic, you've mentally prepared for the interview, and then you get nothing. And we all know that human beings do require closure. It's part of our hardwiring, and that's why sometimes the closure is, do you know what? I'm better not being there. I know it's not 100% satisfactory, but it's keeping with the theme of today. How do you stay positive? Is it's back to that control what you can control. You cannot force somebody to behave like a respectable human being and give you feedback at the end of the day.
My advice would be to write them a really, really shirty email, but don't send it. Just write it and then delete it immediately. For God's sake, don't send it. But to show, share that frustration with your buddies, your mentors. I've got a friend who's really, really senior in HR, and she's went for 7 interviews with an utterly massive blue chip organisation, and they put her through the ringer, and they never told her why she didn't get the job. So it happens at all levels, and that's an HR person in an HR environment who's been totally mucked about by a company who should know better. So it just happens, and it does suck, and you will take it personally, and then you will go, like you say, it's them, not me. So we're coming to the close, and I've got some questions which we're not going to have time to answer, so I'll answer them in the sidebar afterwards. But I wouldn't mind just this obviously is about staying positive during the job search, and I think we've hopefully given quite a few tips about what you can do. Anything else that you want to share, Danielle?
Right. Well, oh my gosh.
I like your ball.
That's one on that earlier. No, I think the main thing is to really break it down into the stages. Just try not to think of it all. I know that the ultimate aim is to get a job. I understand that. But I think if you can break it down into stages, first of all, you need to get clear on what you want. Second, you need to make sure everything's in order and your CV is going to get noticed. Third, you need to make sure that you're approaching the jobs in the right way for you. And then you've got to think about the interview. So just break it down into manageable chunks that you can start to get some confidence about in every way. And like you said, Louise, it's about feeling like you've done something, you've achieved something every day, and that's not going to be, I've got a job every day, but it might be, my CV is smoking today. The next one, it might be, I've been called about a job interview. It's just step by step, and it's just kind of break it down, and it takes away the overwhelm, because I genuinely believe that the overwhelm and the lack of control is what makes people really, the positivity drops.
Okay, thank you. And Gail?
I totally agree with what Danielle said, and I think what I would say is don't neglect the other side of the job search, and that's remaining kind of a human being. Sort of take time out to spoil yourself. As I say, it could be a quick walk around the block. It could be kind of coffee with a friend. Kind of keep in touch with sort of your old network. One of the things that I find with the job club is people almost feel there's a stigma if they're facing redundancy, or even if they're unhappy in a role in work. There's this perception that we've all got to, be loving our current situation, but actually being by yourself can be the unhealthiest time for that. So go and reconnect with people, reconnect with your friends, with your family, and keep on doing the things that make you happy. Because ultimately, the happier you are, the more authentic you will be when you get into the interview, and you can take all of that good preparation that Danielle's just mentioned and present that full authentic you at interview.
That's a lovely roundup, because the two of you have just summarised what I was going to say, which is absolutely that, which is that it is unfortunately in many ways a flawed process. Don't allow yourself to get pulled into that in a negative way. Continue to be organised, continue to nurture the other relationships you have outside of this, and don't let it drag you down. I've interviewed people who I know must have been looking for a job for 5 years just because of their attitude, and it's very difficult not to become that person, but try to approach every job as if you are the solution to their problem and that you are going to nail it. And after a lot of applications, it's tricky, but with the support from a network, including job clubs, I think that you can manage to continue to be authentic, be the person who they want to hire. So thank you for those tips. We are back next week. What are we talking about next week? Planning and managing your job hunt effectively, including effective time management and social media. There's a ton of things we're covering next week. I think you're back with us, Gail, next week, and Danielle, you're back in a couple of weeks.
I am.
I am more than happy to take any contact from people. You can find me on LinkedIn at Louise Triance. There are not many Louise Triances on LinkedIn, so you shouldn't struggle to find me. And I can connect you with Gail or Danielle. And any comments that you've got, please pop in the sidebar, and we will see you in a week's time. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.